You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today, it may seem as if we're focusing on violence against women in conflict zones, in trafficking for sex or labor exploitation, and in deeply embedded cultural values about sexual assault, battery, harassment, and more. But wait, I don't want you to spend the rest of the day psychotically depressed. So know that we're actually focusing on the creative and effective ways that women in the United States and internationally are confronting and combating such horrors. And that is heartening and hopeful and really inspiring. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. We go inside two different headlines this week. One a cause for celebration, the other a cause for mourning. The first is that Catherine Viner has been named editor-in-chief of The Guardian. This is The Guardian UK, of course, becoming the first female editor since the newspaper was founded in 1821. She won the staff vote by a landslide, as well as being appointed by the Scott Trust, the nonprofit owner of the paper. She most recently served as deputy editor of Guardian News and Media and editor-in-chief of Guardian US. And she is a first and an excellent editor, and we congratulate her. Then there is such an outrage that I think it must set a new low in blaming the victim. You will remember some weeks ago that a poet and activist in Cairo, her name was Shaima El-Sabah, she was going to Tahrir Square to lay some flowers as a memorial to the activists who had died there and been killed there in more recent demonstrations, and I think in a way flowers in the memory of the revolution that was and at the moment is not. And she was killed with a blast of birdshot from a police shotgun. She was killed in January, just a day before the anniversary of the Arab Spring Revolt in 2011. On Saturday, a spokesman for the Medical Forensics Authority said in a television interview that it was her fault. Not only because she had been there, but because, he said, quote, according to science, she should not have died. It was a very rare case. She was too thin. You heard me right. He said she was too thin. A chubbier person, he claims, would have survived with only minor injuries. But he said she didn't have any percentage of fat. She was very thin, so the pellets penetrated, and 4 out of 5 of all the pellets that penetrated her body, 4 of the 5 were able to penetrate her heart and lungs, causing her death. Praise the Lord, he wound up saying. It was simply her time to go. A new low in blaming the victim. And now it's time for our first guest. Karen Naimer, that's N like Nancy, A-I-M-E-R, Naimer. Karen is responsible for spearheading Physicians for Human Rights, a wonderful organization, their program on sexual violence in conflict zones. Karen Naimer also leads Physicians for Human Rights international advocacy efforts for policy reforms addressing sexual violence. And they have just come out under her leadership with an extremely important and interesting report on violence following the elections in Kenya. I want to add here before I forget that the Women's Media Center project, womenundersiegeproject.org, is an extremely good place to find in real time the latest news about women in conflict zones and post-conflict zones. Here is Karen Naimer of Physicians for Human Rights. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Karen. Good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
In your work with Physicians for Human Rights, there's a new study that you've been working on mass rape during post-election violence in Kenya. Tell us about it. It's unusual, different, and very important.
Yeah, so in our work with the program on sexual violence in conflict zones at Physicians for Human Rights, we've been working very closely with colleagues in Kenya and also in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on sexual violence, and working with first responders as they help to support survivors of sexual violence, and particularly in conflict zones. And in our work in Kenya, we had a lot of opportunity to work with first responders in the Rift Valley area, which saw a lot of violence, sexual assault in that post-election period in Kenya in December 2007 to about February 2008 during contested national elections at that time for the presidency. And it was reported that there was a lot of sexual violence, gang rapes, targeted assaults that were taking place all over the country, but particularly with focus in this Rift Valley area. And so we worked with researchers from Kenya and from the United States and put together this time series analysis study of the characteristics of sexual violence that emerged during a 5-year period, wow. 2007 to 2011, and we studied more than 1,600 sample medical records and cases, and we did interviews with a whole range of people too, and the healthcare providers that were servicing these survivors. And we learned that during this post-election period, this 3-month period, we saw a particular and distinct quality of the kinds of cases that were being reported. So many survivors didn't actually come to even report. They certainly didn't go to the police to report cases of sexual assault, but some survivors did seek medical care and treatment. And in those cases, during that 3-month period, we saw an increase of survivors who reported gang rape, an increase of survivors who did not know the perpetrator who was responsible for the assault, and an increase, really interesting, an increase in the number of survivors who waited to even get medical care and treatment. And so the study showed that about 23%, or almost a quarter, of the survivors who did report and get medical care and treatment came about 7 to 9 months after the assault.
My God.
When they came in for treatment for labor and delivery.
Well, Karen, do we know why? Was it fear of recrimination? Or what made it different from similar situations, even in the region?
Yeah, so what made this particular element so interesting and so distinguishable from sexual assault over the general 5-year period is that many of these survivors did report fear of reprisal if they went to seek medical care. They were worried about stigma, and because the political environment was so unstable, they were just generally very worried for their own safety and the safety of their families. And amazingly, they reported that they had all these other concerns that they needed to take care of first, these priorities. They needed to care for their families. They needed to obtain food and shelter, which for them took priority over their own medical care and treatment after they endured this horrific crime. They called rape that occurred in the post-election period as a silent emergency, and one that was secondary to all these other needs they needed to take care of first.
My God. You know, sometimes I think that the entire women's rights world revolution hinges on if we could just ever get women to put themselves first. Yeah. Even on one issue once in a while, you know. Oh, what a heartbreaking situation, and what a huge study. So why does this pattern not show itself in other situations, though, where there also is stigma and fear of reprisal? What do you think? Because the instability of the government, that would be another factor.
Yeah, I think that you do see, a slowness or a lag time for survivors to come forward in some contexts.
Yes.
But I think what makes this post-election period so distinguishable from even other contexts is that there was a huge spike in the pattern, in the trends that we see. So you see over the course of 5 years a trend of an enormous amount of sexual assault, and actually what surfaced from this study is also an enormous amount of targeted attacks on children, which is really just so tragic. But you see in this time series analysis a spike in this 3-month period where this is happening in very distinguishable ways. So in other cases over the 5-year period, more survivors tend to know who the perpetrators are if it's community-related violence. It's not more regularly a form of gang rape or, a mass attack. And it's not necessarily, spiking in particular regions more so than others. So that's what makes this study unique. And the other piece of it is that while reportedly in the media there was a lot of information about sexual assault in that post-election period in Kenya, this study is really the first to take that analysis to the medical record review level and to see what evidence by virtue of medical data is there to support the allegations that sexual assault was in fact widespread and or systematic in the methods used in the targeted attacks that were endured.
That's a first. I mean, Physicians for Human Rights does such amazing work, does really, really good work, and this study is so important. There also was, I think you were involved in this, weren't you? The PHR convened a roundtable or a discussion or something on reparations for survivors of sexual violence. This was in the DRC.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that. What reparations, from who would pay it? Who would pay these?
This is such a challenging question for us. So our program, the program on sexual violence in conflict zones, brings together doctors, nurses, police officers, lawyers, and judges all together in one room for several days together. And we do trainings with these colleagues in East and Central Africa, largely in Eastern Congo and in Kenya. And we train on the most effective ways of collecting and documenting and preserving forensic evidence of sexual violence to support largely local prosecutions and also international prosecutions of these crimes.
Right.
And so there are many, many challenges to doing this work, but one of the poignant elements is that it takes so much for each sector, for every step along the way, to work without outside intervention or political distraction or all sorts of, infrastructure support, etc. And it's so hard, of course, and we all know that many survivors don't even come forward to report. But for those who do dare to come forward, the system often fails them because there's a lack of evidence to support their cases. But for those who actually do succeed in finding, judgments that award them reparations and do result in the conviction of the perpetrator, the accused, we see time and again in Eastern Congo that these survivors never obtain the awards that they were meant to receive at judgment. And so we held a roundtable discussion in February, this past February 2014 in Washington, D.C., and we brought together many stakeholders from Congo, from various governments and donors who are deeply engaged in the issue of reparations and investment in the justice process in Congo.
That would be refreshing.
Then there's been an enormous amount of investment in ensuring better access to justice for survivors of sexual violence in Congo. And these initiatives are, some are working better than others, but there has been a concerted effort to support the people who are meant to be supporting survivors and set deeper sensitization of survivors to access justice. But what we found through a study that we did with Columbia researchers and graduate students is that there's that investment from the international community, from donors, from training, the police and the judges. That investment goes through from when a survivor first presents all the way through judgment. But all of that support drops away then. And there are many, many steps that need to happen from judgment until a survivor can actually obtain reparations. And in fact, it's twice as long as, as the steps that we need to go through to get to judgment. But there's no support.
I was just going to say, which means that unless there's support, women drop off. They just don't pursue it. They feel it's useless and they give up. Oh, what amazing work you do. Give the website, Karen, so that people can find out more about Physicians for Human Rights.
Yeah, so the website is www.phr.org.
And is the study on there or an abstract of the study?
Yeah, the study is on there of the post-election violence in Kenya. We also have the summary notes and write-up of the reparations roundtable there, in addition to many other resources if your listeners are interested in about our work, including a film about our program that captures the voices of the many courageous, committed partners we work with in these countries who do this work every day, and they do it with so much heart, so much goodwill, and it's really inspiring to see them do this.
Well, I can say the same thing about you. So much heart and so much inspiration. It's really very special and brilliant work that you're doing, and I thank you personally and on behalf of the listeners for everything that you do and that you're going to continue to do. So take care of Karen herself, please. You're a valuable global resource for women, and thank you also for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's a privilege.
We have to pause for a moment, a short break. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live. And in just a minute, we'll hear from a woman who is an ambassador to the United Nations' wife. But more importantly, years ago, she herself survived being almost trafficked, and she went on to do something about that. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Nelly Gicho-Niyonzima is the wife of the ambassador to the United Nations from Burundi, but that doesn't fully describe her. She is a dynamo of activism. She's the vice president of the Women's International Forum at the United Nations, and she is an activist who has founded an NGO called The Connected Hearts. The Connected Hearts. It's lovely. And their motto is zero exploitation of women and children. And she knows about this because she herself, when she was very young, was almost trafficked. Nelly Gicho-Niyonzima. Nelly, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Robin, so much for the invitation. I am honored to be part of this program.
When I learned that the wife of the ambassador to the United Nations from Burundi, from any country for that matter, the wives, usually smile and pour tea. And if they are at all involved on their own, even these days, it's a very safe subject. But they do not get involved in so-called controversial issues. Tell us about the Connected Hearts and how you came to create it.
Thank you, Robin, for the compliment. When we have a passion as individuals, then we go for it. So that is who I am, and I like to do, what I have to do. I have a role in the society to give back and to serve and to make the best that I can. So that is the motivation that I have.
What made you choose this particular issue?
What made me choose this issue is that it's a global problem, and again, too, is that while back I'm a native Kenyan, and so after college I was looking for a job, and in the newspapers at the classified page, you see that the advertisements, job abroad. And so I went to the agent's office, and, there was a crowd there. There was a crowd, we needed to pay, and so that, documents can be processed. And at that time, I didn't have money. So I walked away, and a week later, there was another article in the newspaper that particular agent is a hoax. That kind of activity was a total hoax. Unfortunately, yes, it was fake. They were criminals. So I kept thinking about this. I said, I am so lucky because I could be a victim. By now, where could I have been?
Yes.
And, it took so many years. It's true. These, issues to do with human trafficking is complex. The best that I can do is just to do the best that I can to create awareness, because there is naiveness in the society.
Yes.
Especially back in Africa. Some of them do not even know what human trafficking is.
I have seen, in fact, and certainly and spoken with victims and survivors around the world, but you can see them, for example, in the Philippines, outside of, in some of the smaller cities in Kenya. You can see them in the townships, the little offices in the townships of South Africa, where you see these, we will get you good jobs abroad. Girls particularly wanted. You can get a job as a secretary, you can work in an office, you can earn good money and send it. And these naive young kids save their tiny little bits of money that they can earn to give to these vultures and go abroad, and then find that their passports have been taken from them and that they're being sexually trafficked or labor trafficked, one or the other, or both.
Or, at times it goes to an extent that, they become victims of organ donors.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you so much, even for thinking of me sharing, because I don't know how many people will listen to this, but somebody somewhere will will listen to this program and will be curious to know more about it. And that is how the importance of information sharing.
That's right. Yeah. Well, this program is now in 110 countries around the world, as well as, of course, nationally syndicated in the United States. So it has a wide reach, and people tend to, I think, by word of mouth, say, you should hear this, or you should listen to this. And we've done many, many programs on trafficking before in the brief life of this program, but nothing has the effect on someone as hearing from someone from their own region. What do you see happening in the changing consciousness in Africa? Because in some parts of the world there seems to be an awareness that trafficking is actually not good for women, children, and other living things, although it's a huge, massive, multinational industry. But what is the attitude largely on the African continent?
The attitude, as I said before, is there's still that naiveness.
Yeah.
Because of the poverty.
Of course.
Situation. I mean, harsh economic situation, especially in the rural areas, and then also the issue of illiteracy.
Yeah.
It's also another thing, because for most educated, especially most educated women, they're enlightened.
Tell me, Nelly, have you experienced any, how shall I put this delicately, have any diplomatic censure or discomfort from diplomatic circles that the wife of the ambassador to the United Nations is involved with such a controversial cause? My God, my God. It doesn't seem controversial at all to you and me, but it's not usual. You're expected to pour tea. Have you encountered any of this?
Not now. Actually, I haven't experienced that, resistance as much.
Good.
Because, here in the U.S., for most of the events that I've done at the UN, I've had really good support.
Good. Now, you also have been the vice president of the Women's International Forum, correct?
Yes.
Tell my listeners a little bit about that.
This forum is actually, the board is made up of ambassadors' wives, and more so is organizing lecture series at the United Nations, and I'm still a member, and the issue is to invite prominent leaders, prominent speakers, to come and share their the experiences and views on some particular subjects that also relate with the United Nations.
Nelly, tell our listeners the website of the Connected Hearts so that they can find out more.
Yes, the website is, of course, www.theconnectedhearts.org.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and our mission is, we are looking at 2030 agenda. That's a long way to go, but we are going step by step, and we look forward to a world free of exploitation of women and children.
People don't seem to realize that there is more slavery, sexual slavery and labor slavery, on the planet today than there was during the hideous period in this country of enslaved people in the United States in the South.
Yes.
They do not realize that. They're incredulous when you tell them. So I, for one, am very grateful that you are taking this work and taking it even further. Thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, and thank you for the work that you do.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, to hear from you, and even for our listeners. Everyone is invited to support in the best way possible. There's room for everyone.
And now it's time for a visit to the Surrealism Corner. So today's selection is an excerpt or a series of quotes from a book called The Organized Mind by Daniel J. Levitin. It was sent in by a listener who used to be a publisher of a newspaper, so she knows a lot about decision overload. All right. We live in a world with 300 exabytes. That's 300 billion is an exabyte. 300 exabytes of information and rapidly expanding. So here is what Levitin has to say about that. Neuroscientists have discovered that unproductivity and loss of drive can result from decision overload. Although most of us have no problem ranking the importance of decisions if we're asked to do so, our brains do not apparently automatically do this. So the mere situation of facing lots and lots of small decisions in daily life creates something called neural fatigue and leaves no energy for the really important decisions. And recent research has proven that people who were asked to make a series of meaningless decisions showed poor impulse control and lack of judgment about subsequent important decisions. One of the most useful findings in recent neuroscience can be summed up as the decision-making network in our brain does not prioritize. It's as though we have only a certain number of decisions per day, and when we reach the limit, oops, can't make any more, never mind how important they may be. So, today, Levitan continues, today we are confronted with an unprecedented amount of information, and we each generate more information than ever before in human history. I didn't realize, this is me, Robin, speaking, I didn't realize that information scientists had quantified all of this. So, what he writes is, in 2011, Americans took in 5 times as much information every day as we did in 1986. That's the equivalent of 175 newspapers. During our leisure time, not counting work, each of us processes 34 gigabytes or 100,000 words every day. The world's 21,274 TV stations produce 85,000 hours of original programming every day, as we watch an average of 5 hours of television each day, which is the equivalent of 20 gigabytes of audio-video images. That is not counting YouTube, which uploads 6,000 hours of video every hour. Every hour! And computer gaming, that consumes more bytes than all other media put together. That includes DVDs, TV, books, magazines, and, wait for it, the Internet. So, this is heavy stuff. Each of us has the equivalent of over 500,000 books already stored on our computers, not to mention all the information stored in our cell phones or on the magnetic strips on the back of credit cards. We have created a world with 300 exabytes of human-made information. If each of these pieces of information were written on a 3x5 index card and spread out side by side, just one person's share, your share of this information, or my share, would cover every square inch of Massachusetts and Connecticut combined together. Neurons, he writes, are living cells with a metabolism. They need oxygen and glucose to survive, and when they've been working hard, we feel fatigue. So every status update that you read on Facebook, every tweet, every text message you get from a friend has to compete for resources in your brain with important things like where you left your passport or how to reconcile with a friend you just had an argument with. The processing capacity of the conscious mind is estimated at 120 bits per second. That bandwidth is the speed limit for the traffic of information we can pay conscious attention to at any one time, while a great deal occurs below the threshold of awareness, and, this has an impact on how we feel. In order for something to become encoded as part of your experience, you have to have paid conscious attention to it. So, in order to understand one person speaking to us, for example, we need to process 60 bits of information per second, 60. With a processing limit of 120 bits per second, this means you can barely understand 2 people talking to you at the same time. Now, we are surrounded on this planet by billions of other humans, and we can understand only 2 at a time at the most. If this explains to you why you might be feeling whelmed, if not overwhelmed, now you know. Time for another quick break here on Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And my next guest coming up after the break is a woman who has managed to popularize raising consciousness about violence against women. It's a remarkable story.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. Mallika Dutt is the founder of the global human rights organization Breakthrough, and she's one of today's most innovative and effective leaders in cultural transformation. She's a longtime attorney and distinguished human rights advocate, and over a decade ago, she decided to bring the values of human rights out of white papers and ivory towers and into real people's real lives. So since then, she has launched numerous pop culture campaigns, multimedia campaigns, award-winning video games with hundreds of thousands of downloads, all as delivery means for the information and consciousness that we all so desperately need and want. Here is Mallika Dutt. Mallika, welcome to the program.
Hi, Robin. It's so wonderful to be talking to you.
It was you who created the award-winning album and music video featuring Bollywood's most popular vocalist that brought domestic violence into India's public dialogue and conversation and consciousness for the first time. It reached more than 150 million people worldwide. And you've done other campaigns. What Kind of Man Are You? A multimedia campaign that spotlighted HIV/AIDS transmission in marriage. And Is This Justice? A multimedia campaign that brought attention to the stigma that women living with AIDS face. And America 2049, a transmedia Facebook game, I love this one, that explores assumptions about racial justice, human rights, and migration. And you've just done so much, but I want to focus on two things particularly. One, your recent article in Lancet, the great British magazine on medicine, and which was concluding that violence against women is an international health epidemic. Finally, it got said. The other is I want to hear about your work in the United States. So take it away.
Robin, I feel like we're at this moment in history. I just feel this kind of energy out there where I feel like all of this work that we've done these last many decades is finally at the potential of a tipping point place.
I do too.
There seems to be sort of energetically something shifting where more and more people that aren't just a part of the women's movement are stepping up and saying, yes, this is a problem, this is my problem, and I'm going to have to do something about it. And that's what we've been trying to make happen for so long that I'm really excited by this moment. So I want to share with you a couple of things that are really top of the mind for me right now.
Good.
One of the things that I am really focused on and have been for the last couple of years now is how do we bring men into this conversation in a way that's about partnership and accountability. How do we talk about the role of men in promoting gender equality, promoting women's human rights, ending violence against women, understanding both the role that they play as perpetrators, because a lot of the time we're talking about male violence against women, but also understanding really clearly how the current constructs of patriarchy deeply undermine men. So in trying to craft the language and the multimedia tools and the research and the dialogue and the engagement around that, I've been really active in the U.S. around a campaign that we're calling Be That Guy. And Be That Guy is about asking men to step up and be that guy who challenges his buddy or any other man and says, you know what, that behavior that you just engaged in, that's not okay. That's not cool. Cut it out. So what we've done is we've created a couple of animations that have been playing at games like NASCAR, the national racing places. So our animations have been at NASCAR, at Daytona, at the Indy 500, and I'm learning all about sports arenas. Did you know that car racing is one of the most watched sports in America? Like, who knew? So we've had this fantastic partnership with an organization called Grazie Media that runs the Jumbotrons in these places. Jumbotrons with millions of men watching. And so in the middle of all of these general sports commercials, for the last year, we've been running animations like Be That Guy that are really asking men to step up and say, it's not okay to sexually harass women.
Interesting. What's been the reaction?
Really positive. Both Grazie Media and Breakthrough have conducted pre and post quick on the spot surveys to see whether the animations have had any kind of an impact on men. And we've seen a 44% increase in men saying that after watching that ad, that they would call out a friend, that it never occurred to them that that was an action that they could take.
Wow.
We've done focus groups with fraternity men in campuses across the United States. We've done reviews of sort of existing sexual assault data, and we're going to be piloting this semester a program where we really ask fraternity men to step up as leaders against sexual assault.
Talk a little bit about the Lancet article and the world health epidemic that violence against women is. I'm very grateful that it is finally being cast in that light.
So, Robin, the pandemic of violence against women is the largest human rights epidemic on the planet.
Correct.
It's a human rights epidemic in terms of health, in terms of economics, in terms of social structures, in terms of the family, in terms of the political landscape. I mean, by any arena of how human interaction happens, the human rights of women, and particularly violence against women, is the largest pandemic. It is a matter of world security. It's a matter of public health. It's a matter of how we treat our planet, because the way we treat women is also an arbiter of how we treat our natural resources. So when Lancet decided to focus their issue on violence against women as a public health issue, it was really important for those of us who've really been looking at community-based interventions and looking at ecosystem transformation as a necessary condition to get us beyond violence against women, to get our voices out there.
Yes.
So one of the things that I have come to deeply believe is that if we really want gender equality and we want to end violence against women, it's not just about doing legal services for women or providing them with battered women's shelters. So an ecosystem approach means that we have to work at the individual level, so both men and women and all individuals understand how violence is their issue. We have to address it at the interpersonal level. So it's about sort of relationships between couples, within families. It's at the community level and how community institutions or community leaders show up around this. And it's at sort of the larger societal level.
Right.
And so the article that I co-authored with some incredible women who are doing very, very important work in their own countries as well was our experience, decade-long experience of how we have taken this ecosystem model of transformation into India, into Uganda, into Nicaragua, and actually have seen results on how change can happen when instead of putting all of the burden on ending violence against women on women alone, we really demand responsibility from the entire ecosystem within which women live.
This was a great article. It really was. I urge my listeners to look it up and read it. It's very important. And in so many areas. I mean, for one thing, there's the generational aspect of this within a family. Little girls who grow up with battering fathers tend to build relationships with violent men. Little boys who grow up with violent fathers tend to become violent fathers. So it becomes a generational hand-me-down. And to see it in context of all of these levels that you approach it is absolutely necessary and long past due. Also, of course, we know that men listen to each other more than they listen to women. So when you get men involved, you're getting a whole other level, as long as it's involved with real consciousness. I congratulate you.
Thank you.
Mallika, give the website of the organization that you founded, Breakthrough, so that our listeners can find out more.
So Breakthrough's website is www.breakthrough.tv. We work at the community level in India and in the United States. And we work in partnership with other parts of the world, in Nepal and Bangladesh and Brazil and a whole bunch of other places. So we really try and understand our work sort of from the local grassroots community level, whether it's a college campus in the United States or a village in India, connecting out to a global movement for human rights. And you can learn more about our work there.
So that's www.breakthrough.tv. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
One last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I remain, Robin Morgan. We'll be right back, and we'll have some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again in time for some fighting words. You may recall the news story on March 19th that scores of men who were visiting a mosque in downtown Kabul, Afghanistan, became a violent mob, beating and stomping to death a student of Islam, Farkhunda, age 28, on the completely false rumor that she had burnt a Quran. They pummeled her, they ran over her with a Toyota hatchback, they dumped her body on the banks of the river, and they lit the body on fire. Photos and videos of the rampage shocked the world, and since then 26 men have been arrested in connection with the homicide. And 3 days later, more than 1,000 people gathered for her funeral in the Afghan capital. Fariba Nawaz and Asra Nomani wrote a piece in the Daily Beast, so I'm adding to it the news that I have, because something astonishing happened. A courageous band of about 30 Afghan women, many clad in black scarves and some in black outfits, did something unheard of. They literally shouldered the dead woman's body, Farkhunda's body, that had been beaten and burned to death. They shouldered her coffin, draped with a green cloth and decorated with verses from the Quran, and with bouquets of flowers on the top of the coffin. And they carried that coffin through the streets of Kabul, defying the culture in order to give her a proper burial. This is completely unheard of. The women chanted, "We are all Farkhunda, we want justice." Now, the symbolic assertion of power and strength by these women, which defies the ban against women at cemeteries that's observed among the most conservative groups in Islam, is a staggering rejection of that interpretation of Islam. From Mumbai in India to Hayward, California, certain mullahs and clerics ban women from burials, citing their own interpretation of Islam, which is largely exported by the Saudis from their own version of Wahhabism or Salafism. The amazing thing, though, is that these women in Kabul made the decision to go to the house of the dead woman and try to carry the coffin. They stood around the house, they debated, they were ordinary women. Some of them were local women's rights activists, some of them, there was an Afghan journalist, there was two young activists for youth rights, and they waited for the ambulance to bring her body, and they went and they spoke to her brothers and sisters and family and asked them for permission to carry the coffin to the graveyard. Now, meanwhile, a professor of sociology in Kabul named Elna Arabzada was waiting for the answer. That morning she'd seen a Facebook post about the gathering, and she was 3 months pregnant. Still is. She said that she was trying to convince her family that nothing would happen if they protested, but she says, "I needed some place to shout and cry loud." So finally she convinced her family and took a taxi to Farkhunda's home and joined the women, and then they all got word that the family had given permission. They followed the ambulance with the body to the Pransad family cemetery, and there they took the coffin to a space in the graveyard where mourners did a final prayer, and the women hoisted the coffin on their shoulders for the 30 minutes walk to Farkhunda's burial spot. Arabzada was struck by men weeping around her, many of them not related to the victim, or so seeming not related. She said, "I was waiting to see if men would sit silent in this journey. If they did, I would run away. I would sell everything and no longer live here. My husband even said we would seek a smuggler to take us out. But when we saw the actions of some signs of civil society, it gave us hope." At the cemetery, some of the women wore masks of a bloody face to symbolize the shocking, much circulated image of Farkhunda after the attack. More women joined them. A renowned Afghan photographer, she carried the coffin. A social empowerment manager at a local radio station, a political scientist and a civil society activist. The medical student, who was one of them, said, "It was a long trek, and I think I injured myself, but it doesn't matter. All my energy was focused on giving Farkhunda a respectable burial. It was the first time I realized my power and told myself I'm breaking the boundaries of tradition." Well, suddenly a mullah appeared. He was a cleric who had supported the murder on video 2 days earlier. The social engagement manager, one of the women, shouted back at him, "You are not allowed to do the janzana, the funeral prayer. Leave, you leave." One of the dead woman's brothers said, "I have lost a sister, but I have found 30 other sisters today." And the youth activist said, "I wanted to tell the women in this country, do it like a woman. That if we want to achieve anything, we should do what we want to do, and if we stick together, we break taboos. We stood up against this mullah, we carried the coffin and buried her. If, as women, we stand together, we can achieve great change." And as they resisted the mullah's efforts to say a prayer, they performed one more act of resistance. They interlocked hands and created a circle around her gravesite until the mullah left. That, to me, is one of the signs of the human spirit at its best. And that's it for today. Join us next week when Cora Weiss will be among my guests. She's the woman who co-founded Women's Strike for Peace way back in the 1960s, together with Bella Abzug, and Cora has paused in the pursuit of peace since then, not once. She is one of the foremothers and is still on the job. This program is syndicated, but if you cannot find the broadcast on a radio station in your own area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com. There you can have the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and also at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. And be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and here's the last straw for this week. Demonstrating in person the problem of gender disparity in Silicon Valley gave us some awkward moments during the South by Southwest Festival recently in Texas, according to a report in the Daily Dutt. Eric Schmidt, Google's executive chairman, reportedly kept talking over former colleague and current White House Chief Technology Officer Megan Smith. In fact, Smith was interrupted by Schmidt so many times that Judith Williams, head of Google's Unconscious Bias program, called Schmidt out for his behavior. I don't think he was doing it on purpose to demonstrate unconscious bias. Be sure and join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.